neighbor came up with the idea to make a really small museum in her front yard. She actually did it with another friend of hers, so there's 2 sister museums in each of their yards that are in the same neighborhood, but the 14th Street is down the street from me. I was invited to be one of the artists for the month of April. I decided to make a small puppet show that would fit in the box and tell a story by changing the scene each day. Kind of like stop motion, but I wanted to make the puppets with the intention that they would be able to do a live show when the month was completed. The most recent puppet that I had made was a rabbit based on myths about the rabbit in the moon, and I was excited to get to work more on bringing that story to life. While I was researching different versions of that story, I discovered a folk tale that I had never heard before called Ostara and the White Hare. It's about Ostara, the goddess of spring, and the strange connection that's found between rabbits and eggs that we see during Easter. It wasn't planned at all, but it ended up being perfect timing for my show, as April is the peak springtime in Austin, and everything was just starting to bloom and turn bright green, and also it's the month of the Easter holiday. I had recently run into my friend Daryl Myers, and I knew that he would be the perfect fit to create music for this story. I started by making a mock-up box, the same dimensions as the museum, and then I made 2 small stages that could be inserted into it. This ended up being really helpful because it gave me much more freedom to create the scenes in my studio each day. And then I would carry them down and carefully insert them into the museum. It has a narrow opening on the side. Making the puppets for the show was also in line with the spontaneity and uniqueness of this project for me. When I'm making marionettes out of wood, it's usually a very meticulous process that begins with a lot of precision and planning. In this case, kind of got to work backwards by starting with the scraps that I had left over from larger, more pattern puppets, and played around with just letting the shapes of the scraps help me find the characters. Because the story was going to unfold one day at a time, I didn't have to make the whole show before I began the month. I did make the 2 characters that would appear the first days of the show beforehand, but the rest of the puppets and each scene was made on a daily basis. I decided to write the words out for the story and incorporate different watercolors with them to help with the narration. Again, these were done daily and very quickly, and sometimes they were even still wet when I was hanging them up in the museum. Having the daily deadlines of each scene combined with the small scale made it surprisingly spontaneous and playful for me. Didn't really have time to deliberate over anything, and this led to a lot of fun discoveries, such as fabric in my studio. I would grab kind of different colors and textures. Ended up being a great way to express different movements and feelings in that setting that was so static. Unlike a show that would be performed repeatedly, things didn't have to last more than that day, and I didn't have to worry about traveling with it. Would it be too heavy? I found myself collecting rocks and logs from my yard and sticks, and for one scene I even dug up grass one morning and put it in a box with dirt, which I discovered later ended up steaming up the box, which is very nice and airtight. My house is on one end of the block, and the museum is on the other end, and between us I would pass by my neighbor Josie's house, and she's a wonderful floral artist. Her yard was just starting to burst with bluebonnets and poppies, and I asked her one day if she'd want to collaborate on this spring scene. So I took the box down to her the next morning, and I told her to just have fun doing whatever she wanted. My month-long residency at the museum started on April 1st, and I wanted to do something for April Fool's Day before starting to tell the story. I learned that the 1st of April is an official city holiday in Odessa, Ukraine. It's a day that's celebrated with laughter, and every year they have a large parade and host an international clown and mime festival. On April 2nd, I introduced the show with my moon rabbit as the narrator, and I gave a shout out to all the neighborhood rabbits. Because each scene was created daily, we had to wait until the last day to put the images together with the music. We had a closing party and invited people to watch a slideshow of the story in a little mini movie tent that we made in the yard. I had 2 days left in the month when I had completed the story, and I asked Josie if she would like to play with me again, this time with one of her dried arrangements. During the pandemic, I had planted several rose bushes in my yard, and on April 1st, I got a wonderful, surprising first bloom of the year. And as the month went on, the bushes became full, and I would cut roses for my studio every day and then saved all the petals as they fell. I had just heard an Alice Walker poem, "While Love is Unfashionable," and the last line of the poem says, "Let us gather blossoms under fire." I decided to end the show with that poem and did a ritual for myself of spreading out the petals I'd collected all month around the museum. It was a nice way to end the month. I'm very grateful to everyone who followed along with me during the month, watching the story unfold, and I hope you enjoy viewing the slideshow.